Welcome to the Backpick Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Thomas. Today's guest is Yeshayah Goldfarb. Yeshayah has been with the Giants organization for the last 25 years in analytics and operations. We take a deep dive into a bunch of analytics, stuff that can help a youth athlete, maybe how to use information, maybe how to ignore some information. Hope you guys enjoy it. The Backpick Podcast and the Catching Academy are happy to be partnered with All Star Sports, who we think does the best job of taking care of catchers. You can go to their website and use our code CatchingAcademy10 and get 10% off anything site-wide. So you've spent the last, by my research, 24 years in the Giants organization, and I'd ask you what you did, but man, when I looked at it, it was a lot of different things. Give us kind of a brief summary of what you've done with the Giants for the last couple decades.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, Brett. I really appreciate it. I look forward to talking baseball for as long as it goes.
Absolutely.
I love the game, and after I graduated college, I played at UC San Diego. I was a sidearm reliever after watching Eckersley grow up, and I wanted to stay in the game. So from the Bay Area, good timing, got an internship basically right out of college, and learned the game from the bottom up in the Giants organization. So you're right. Being there 24 years, I kind of did a little bit of everything. I started out doing kind of general internship stuff, lots of data entry of scouting reports into our internal system because it was before Wi-Fi was strong enough in hotels for scouts to write reports that way. So they would fax, something called a fax machine, and mail me all the reports.
You have been there a long time.
I've been there a long time. Wrote a bunch of reports. I did video in the clubhouse that year, so really was a fly on the wall for a lot of conversations. '01 was my first year, so it was the year Bonds broke the single season record, which was unbelievable. So uniquely a front row seat right off the dugout for that. And just like players, coaches would sit with me and we'd watch the game together and talk baseball. So it was just, I learned the scouting side. I learned kind of on the coaching side, be comfortable around players. And then I started doing analytical projects for the front office pretty much from day one because it was a need. And, by the next year, I was our analytical voice in the draft room. I started doing a lot of administrative stuff for player development, continued to do the video work. And just over time, kind of I climbed the ranks in player development, ultimately oversaw it for about 10 years, at least from the front office side of it. I kind of built our analytics department and was our lead analyst for a long time. And then lots of roster construction throughout the minor leagues and major leagues. And you just kind of like, as the calendar turns, you're working on different things. And so that's like the foundation of my baseball world. We were the same group for a long time under Sabian. And when Farhan came in, I feel like I learned as much under him as I did all those previous years because he brought in a bunch of new staff from other organizations. So you got to see how they did things. And he was very analytical minded as well. And so he brought a new way of evaluating players that kind of added to my skill set and my understanding of kind of roster construction, what can be valued, ways to develop players. And so, I don't know, I think I still feel like I'm learning every day with the game. And I got, so many memories, so many amazing staff I learned from over the years. And that's like what I cherish probably the most of anything in my experience there.
So cool. I mean, that's what's so great about the game in general, right? I think that's why all of us are in it in some level. But talk a little bit about the analytics, because I feel like if we're talking the last 25 years, man, there's been a crazy shift in analytics in the last 25 years. Yeah. Talk about just that transition of what it's become, maybe the good, the bad, the ugly of it all, and how it's kind of gotten to where it is now.
Yeah, obviously it's a broad stroke. It's so much has changed. Most people listening to this may be familiar with Moneyball. So that was about the 2002 season. So that was my second year there. And a lot of that, data was very limited then. And I know it portrays that other front offices weren't necessarily using data then. The Giants were. I was doing a lot of that. But really kind of, there's a few inflection points is what I would call them. One major one was 2008. And that's when a Sport Vision got involved in baseball, and they, before it was like a fully formed stat line and some, play-by-play data, and Sport Vision started tracking the ball. And so you could see, when the ball left the pitcher's hand and where it crossed the plate, and some batted ball data, and that was new to us. And so we were the test team with that. They did it in San Jose Giant Stadium, they did it at Scottsdale Stadium, and so we were the first users and movers in baseball on it. And it was a competitive advantage for us for a while, until every other team joined them. And so that was a new data set, new ways to look at players. We also could use that data. We created a kind of player development plans for all our minor league players. So when I was running player development, you could find with that data and current data, we had, strengths and weaknesses of players. So we could have a sit down with players and just show them, areas to improve. We'd usually have a coach in there and talk through drills they potentially could do, or things they can work on even in the off season. It's very commonplace now, but that was like an early way to use data with player development beyond kind of the evaluation piece.
And what was that? What was that like
Yeah.
when that first came out? Like, what was that data? What was like the initial data that you guys felt was the most valuable when you? I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's changed, but since when it first started.
Yeah. Well, pitch FX is what it's called, is pitch FX, hit FX, and command FX. And so each one had different functions for us. But at the basic level, all we had was like outcome stats. It's like, that's a hit, maybe directionally where it went. And now we had like the exact velocities of every pitch, which sounds kind of simple and silly, but we didn't have that. We knew where it crossed the plate. We could create batted ball data. So instead of saying, this batter's OPS is X or their batting average is this, you could actually create a model that shows what it should have been based on how hard the ball was hit and the direction it was hit and the angle it was hit at. Because, from baseball, like, you can be lucky over a period of time and even a season potentially, but you can look at all the balls hit at 100 miles per hour at a 9-degree angle to right field to this location, and you can estimate how often that's a hit or not. So it's like, it's really becomes a more accurate predictor of what's going to happen next, which is important when you're evaluating players. And then it's also helpful psychologically, and definitely at Oracle, I think it was AT&T Park then, when you hit a ball 415 feet and it gets caught in the alley, and the batter is just pissed off. Well, we can show them that it went out of every other ballpark. That might not make them feel better in the moment, but it does like create a better understanding of what the player really is and what they will be, particularly when you're in a pitcher's environment.
So then from there, it obviously expanded into much more in terms of like what kind of data. How did you implement when you talk about like coaches? Because I love you talking about coaches being involved. Because my biggest thing with data is like you can have all the data in the world. If you have no idea what to do with it, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So talk about the connection between the data, the analytics, and the coaches, because I know and I'm sure at first there was a lot more kind of friction in the sense of like a lot of like baseball guys probably didn't completely buy into the analytics thing and vice versa. Talk about that connection and how that kind of came together.
Yeah. It's a great question. I would say, like, in general with the Giants, because that's the ecosystem I knew, the friction was pretty minimal for most of my career. And I think part of it is like, I was very close with Dick Tidrow, who was the head of scouting and running player development. I'm doing a lot of the analytics and technology and video, but I'm pretty comfortable in the scouting space. So that bridge was very helpful. I think a lot of it is approach. I find a lot of analytics is actually like super intuitive for coaches. It just needs to be presented in the right way. It's not usually like replacing decisions they make, it's helping decisions they make and help inform them. And so, every coach is not going to take to it immediately. And I'll give you, and there's like examples of it being really successful and not as much so. We were probably the first major league team to bring in a markered biomechanics system into player development. It was actually in 2008, which is super, super early. So we're talking almost 20 years ago. And we had a number of coaches that took some interest in it, like what the data was. And we initially were just trying to do a basic capture of what it is, but it's a challenge because you have to incorporate it into like the daily schedule and what the players are working on, and it's hard to take away from that. But then there's value you might gain, but the value is not immediate because you got to look at the data. So it's just like when you're doing something new, it can be challenging. So a lot of it's communication. I think the biggest challenge we have with that the specific like data set and capture was just the actual technology was very finicky. So like something that might have taken 20 minutes would take like an hour and a half, and it was hot in there and it'd get frustrating. So we ended up getting good data from it. I can't say like it was a difference maker. I've got from that, the Giants have like Posey's swing and Bumgarner throwing when they're like when Bumgarner's 19 years old, or
Lincecum
Kane in
came
there,
to
or
mind when you said
Lincecum.
that. Yeah, thinking about his
Exactly.
biomechanics and what that looked like.
It's like fascinating and it's valuable, but we also hadn't built the infrastructure of staff to like really take it in and make it as actionable as it can. So like when we're talking about working with coaches, I think some of the friction can exist because when I started, we were mostly generalists. Like we did a lot of different things because staff was small, and now there's a lot larger coaching staff. So like I call them coaching staff, but like we have four biomechanists on staff with the Giants when I left. And what they do is super valuable. And if we had one or two on staff when we started in '08 with the biomechanics information, I actually think it would be way more successful. But like with any organization, it's challenging to bring in somebody who is an expert at a space that kind of overlaps maybe with what a coach is doing biomechanically. So that's more of a human element, but they both have the same goal. They are an expert, a biomechanist, an expert in how the body moves and is able to use data to inform decisions. And theoretically, like that is kind of gold for a coach. It's like a way to inform maybe what they're already working on, whether it's a mechanical advantage or not. And now I think because the data is so good, I know the Giants were getting really good at blending the player development and coaches like when I left, just because we now had like every single pitch and every single swing. So, before a coach might spend hours looking at like what has changed in that swing because the batter is really sucking the last month. And now a biomechanist can look at it quickly and be like, oh, they are lifting their foot like 3 or 4 inches higher than they were, which the coach might have found, but it's like another way of looking at it. Or like if the stride length of a pitcher is longer or whatever it is, it can just pick up things quickly. That's like one example. There's tons and tons of them. But the really neat thing about analytics now is as it's become more involved in the way the body moves, I think it's become a lot more intuitive and valuable for a lot of coaches that are teaching the players as well.
Yeah, it's so cool. I
Yeah.
mean, again, like, I think there's a fine line in terms of the analytics kind of taking over, and I think it's more at younger levels. Obviously, professional organizations have all the staffing to kind of meld the pieces together. But if you are, and you do have a high school son that plays,
Yeah.
when you're talking about his development and what you guys are doing and working on, if you're talking to a 16-year-old kid, what is the analytics that they can use to their benefit? How do they use it to their benefit to develop themselves?
Yeah, good question. It's funny, like even with my background, I have chosen to stay away from a lot of the analytical stuff and a lot of his development. I will incorporate it in, and I am actually often pretty purposeful about how I incorporate it in, just because I don't want him to lose like the competitive piece to it, kind of be like the basic foundational stuff that he's learning. And I'll give you examples. Like on the hitting side, from a very young age, we did a lot of like hand-eye coordination drills. So, little wiffle balls, we might use like a broomstick or like a really thin bat, when he's 3 or 4, when a kid might be frustrated, he's not, because that's all he's seen. Where
Mm-hmm.
maybe a lot of kids will have like that big red bat and a giant ball and hitting it. Like, I want him to have hand-eye coordination, and I know analytically that at some point every hitter will hit their ceiling if they swing and miss on pitches in the zone. Like at the basic level, if you can't hit a fastball in the zone, let's just say above 92 miles an hour, 94 miles an hour, 96 miles an hour, like your baseball career is going to end at some point. So
Mm-hmm.
that hand-eye piece, and then wiffle balls are neat because you can also work on player develop. I mean, at plate discipline at the same time, because I know analytically that's super important. Like if you can lay off pitches outside the zone, you're going to be at a huge advantage and be able to work pitches in your count. So like those are just two basic like analytical foundations, but trying to find drills to work on it. So like I might say if he swings at a pitch that's not in his zone, I'm going to comment it. I'll be like, hey, that was out. Hey, that was up. Hey, that was down. So over time, even from a young age, he's learning hand-eye coordination. He's learning plate discipline. And so those are like ways that I'm not talking about it with them, but I'm teaching it to them. And I think you can do that all the way up. At a certain point, once they start taking interest in it, I'm at a certain point maybe to like maybe even like make a point of why maybe a change is necessary. Maybe you start bringing it in. But if you're talking about it a lot, it just becomes he knows a lot of the foundational analytical stuff based on how he learned the game.
So you guys aren't, ripping on a Rapsodo every time you hit or have a hit tracks in your backyard or anything like that.
We are not. But I will say, like, when we get access to one, we'll do some deep dives into it. And so he understands it, but I'll give you an example. Like, there were times with the Giants that, like, we have, every single mound, and a lot of pro organizations have that. Every single mound when you throw a bullpen, you've got an Edgertronic camera behind you that's capturing the ball when it leaves your fingers. You got TrackMan on for every pitch, and you've got an iPad that's blending the two, so you can literally watch it after every pitch. So you can see the movement, you can see how the ball releases the hand, you can see the spin. So that is super, super valuable if you're doing pitch design, or you're like working on optimizing certain pitches, but it's not necessarily valuable for every bullpen. And so what would happen was it got to the point at certain times where like pitchers after every single pitch would go look at the data. What did that pitch do? Then go it. And you're like forgetting to compete in the bullpen and like command the ball in a lot of ways instead of like throwing that bastard movement pitch. And so we actually eased back on it at one point. So that was like an example, like maybe it went too far and now it had been used when I left, a little bit more targeted. You're still going to capture the data every bullpen because it's actually valuable to see where you're at, but you're not necessarily going to like look at it and reference it every rep. You might like do a debrief. So I think once you start capturing a lot of data, I think the value is often like an after workout or after a game report that you can look at so that it's like you understand it, you can get like real feedback on yourself and what you did, but you're not thinking about it or necessarily utilizing it in a moment when you're trying to compete. And I think that's a big deal. And I would argue in practice, there are times you're just trying to compete and it's not about the data. But I do think there's a lot of value in capturing as much data as possible during practice and in games because it will inform kind of where you're at and maybe changes you can make at some point. And so it's like a blueprint of what you did that day at a moment in time, which you may not have value for it at the moment, but at some point you may.
Yeah, I'm not doing well, so let me go back to when I was doing well. What did that look like, and what were those numbers, and something to draw back. But I love hearing you say this because, again, like,
Yeah.
coming from somebody in analytics and has, knows all this stuff, deep dive, like here you are, you're developing your son. And the reality is like the two things that I think we lose out on in youth sports with all the data is throwing strikes and getting hits, right? And
Yeah.
I say getting hits because everybody's so consumed on the exit velocity and the launch angles and the things like that. And the reality is, like, we have to learn how to get hits. I know that kind of at the highest level, we've kind of diminished the value of batting average, and it makes sense at that level because there's different objectives. But at the end of the day, every single one of those guys on TV hit 400 or 500 in high school, and it wasn't because of any sort of, data, bat speed, launch angle. It was just the idea that they learned bat to ball skills. Yep. And the same thing with, a ton of these pitchers that learned how to pitch, and then they gained some velocity, and all of a sudden they became big time prospects because of that. So that's where I always argue, because there's people in here that are always like, oh, when are you going to get a hit tracks and a whatever? And I'm like, I personally don't see the value in it. I think we're looking at a very small sample size that would benefit from that. Yep. And the reality becomes, again, is it good to have the data? Yes. But when you put it in front of them, it's hard to not show it to them. They're so eager to see it and do it. And the data I want them to be focused on is getting hits. What's your batting average, throwing strikes, low ERA, low, walk to strikeout ratio, all those things that make it, from a catching standpoint, it's like when people talk about their pop times, I'm like, dude, what is your caught stealing percentage? Right? Like, I mean, how many guys are you actually throwing out? Because the reality is we don't need the best pop time to throw guys out all the time. And we need to learn how to get our body to work consistently and repetitively, that I throw it down there with some accuracy and some velocity. And then I learn how to speed that up when I need to speed that. Oh, that guy got a good jump. How do I get the ball out quicker? And understanding the feel of that. So it's refreshing, again, you being such a analytical background, to say that, and I hope that people are listening, because I do think that there's so much more value in the things you're talking about, hand-eye, competitiveness, plate discipline and things like that.
Yeah, you make a ton of good points in what you're saying. I have a few kind of maybe like real-life examples in what you're talking about as relates to my son and development, and these are like where I've seen like stats and competing like and development like hit a crossroads. An example is like, frankly, a lot of like youth umpires can be pretty unpredictable. And I've had this debate actually with Ezra, my son, about this, and I have an opinion. I think he's closer to my opinion now, but it's like changed over time. But like, if you're a hitter and the strike zone is bigger than it should be, and let's say you have 2 strikes on you, like, should you be expanding the zone to stay alive, or should you let that go to walk? I think is a question. Like that's like I hear a lot of coaches all the time say like, you got to swing at anything that's close. My personal opinion is like, I actually would rather the athlete up there still swing at pitches that they can drive. I would let pitches that are balls go with 2 strikes, even if the umpire might ring you up. Because for me, I believe like there are only a few like bad ball hitters in the world that are good at it. Not many in the big leagues. And what you're probably going to do if you expand the zone is hit a ground ball to second. You're just not going to hit it hard. Or you might miss it, and you're letting the umpire take you out of your game. So like, it's like an example, kind of, you mentioned the hits. Like you might have a more likely chance of getting a hit, but I would argue you might have a better chance to get on base, or you might have a chance to see another pitch where they make a mistake to like really drive the ball. And so that's like, it's a dilemma that exists more in youth. The umpiring gets better as you go up in levels. Another one, which is a little bit more niche, is Ezra has a swing path that he hits a lot of balls in the air. Like, that is a good thing in baseball. It's a change that happened really in the game in the early 2010s, 2012, 2014, where a lot of hitters have been taught to hit the ball hard on the ground. Analytically, it was shown you hit the ball in the air, like, if you hit a line drive, you're going to hit 600 on average. If you hit a ball in the air and it drops, you're going to have an extra base hit like over 80% of the time. If you hit a ground ball, you can only get an extra base hit like 7% of the time. You got to hit it right down the line. And then you're going to bat under 200 in the big leagues with a ground ball. So like, also pitchers are trying to get ground balls. So that was like just a change. So anyway, get back to Ezra. He's got a fly ball swing. He hits the ball in the air, which I think is like really valuable long term, and it's going to lead to power. But at certain times during his young career, a lot of balls were caught. Like there were fly balls to the outfielders. And so analytically, like that's a question, right? You want to get hits, it's important. But also, those fly balls will also go down the line or in the gap, and then it's a triple. And so for me, like I didn't think it made sense to change that plane. He's still getting stronger, and I believe that those balls are eventually going to be home runs on a regular basis if he gets strong enough to do it, because the path is there. And so it didn't make sense to like change the swing or change the path, even though he might get out more at this level. Like at the younger levels, you hit a ground ball, you're going to get on base if you hit it hard. And so, but I do think like there's value in like being productive and competitive and winning at whatever age you're at. But I do think it's also worth thinking ahead. And that's where like the little balls come in. That's where like I've given Ezra a lot of velocity as a hitter from a young age. And even though you don't see that until you get older, like they need to learn that. And I see a lot of parents or coaches just kind of lobbing the ball to them, and you can get a good swing on it and you can hit that hard, but I don't know that that's like developing what's coming next. So those are kind of examples of where it like blends the analytics and the development, kind of along the lines with what you were saying.
And I think the biggest takeaway from that is the immediate when you said that is short term versus long term, right? And that's the problem to me with the youth landscape in general is we're so short term, right? We have a tournament this weekend and we have to win it. You know, it's no longer like, hey guys, we're going to play a 50-game regular season and then we go into the playoffs and then we go do the thing where it's like, hey, you know what? There's some spots out there. We're going to give guys opportunity, and, you know, we're not concerned about losing in the first 20 games because we're still learning. Our goal is to win a championship, so we just got to get to the playoffs and give ourselves a fighting chance. And I think with all this, you know, short term, we're just, hey, I got a tournament this weekend. Hey, I got a tournament this weekend. Hey, well, the best players play in the best situations. They feel that pressure to have to be somebody that day, and there's no look at the long-term vision of that. And that's where I argue a lot of times against, you know, like I'm a big fan of Little League Baseball. And I think as somebody in the game, I think I'm in the minority when I tell people that. But the reality becomes, you know, they play for their community and some pride with guys they go to school with. And then B, it's like they have a regular season and a playoffs. And then they go to All-Stars. And they're competing in games now where they got to look down the dugout and go, man, if we lose this game, I don't know when I'm going to see these guys next. Right? Yeah, and those feelings that you can't replicate anywhere else, we're just in this you know, little bitty sample sizes of, hey, we got to win the Labor Day Classic this weekend, so sorry Billy only got 2 at bats, right? And it's like, well, how is this making any sense? So how do you, again, like giving advice to, you know, kids, you've seen your son go through it, how do you navigate that? I mean, it's just there's honestly doesn't seem like there's a ton of ways around it.
Yeah, a great question. I guess in like Little League's amazing. His team won. I was assistant coach like his last year in Little League. It's like what you would want to happen. It was a group of kids he had been playing with for a while. I actually think high school baseball a lot of time has some semblance of like,
100%
because
agree.
there's so much travel that like the high school team is more like the rec league now. And I know that there's some higher level high school teams, and I know that there's probably a little bit better coaching at a lot of high schools, but it's still like in comparison, you're not having colleges at those games. You're with players that you go to school with. A lot of them are your friends, and like Ezra has gotten really close to that group, and they've created a great culture on that high school team. It's like something they have this shared experience. And what I really like I know soccer, a lot of the top soccer players don't play on their high school teams anymore, and that makes me sad. I would hate to see that happen to baseball. I think maybe the high-end players don't play on their high school teams, but in general, I think the travel schedule has separated itself from the high school schedule, and I think that's like a moment in time to like fall back in love with the game for a lot of athletes if they are frustrated with the travel piece and compete with your friends and like also play with players that maybe at a lot of different levels on the same team and finding a way to win, which I think is important. Yeah, the social media stuff with friends on other teams is great. I just think there's a lot of positives around it. I'm with you 100%. And I know like Ezra's travel experience, something we did that everyone's going to do it differently and they're in different circumstances, but he was on a travel team. He was on the Cyclones, which is like an Albany, Berkeley travel team. I think it was like 11U, 12U, 13U, 14U. So it was like the same group of kids and it was the same program. And then he went to Zoots, which is a great travel program in high school, which I had done some research on before he got there. And it's a little bit more mom and pop, I would say. Like John Zuber has been running it forever. Um, I asked him a question before Ezra started as a freshman. I just asked him like how many teams you're going to have, and his answer to me I thought was very telling. He basically said, "I don't know yet. It matters how many coaches that I trust that are going to be willing to do it this year." So he was basing the number of teams not on demand, but on coaches that he really believed in, which I thought was neat. He ended up having 4 teams. He had, four coaches that he had vetted and he liked. And so Ezra did that for 3 years. And I can't think another nice side piece that's valuable with that is he gets to know Ezra very well, and the other coaches do as well, which I think can get lost a little bit in the travel. Like there's a number of players that will jump from one program to another. And actually that relationship between the travel coach and college coaches is pretty valuable because, college coaches will come and watch a tournament and they might see your kid do really well, but they're immediately going to go to that travel coach and get more background on them. Or before they get to the tournament, they may reach out to the travel coach and be like, hey, who are some players I should be paying attention to? And so, like, I used to get frustrated early in Ezra's like travel career in high school. Like he'd have this great tournament, but there are no college coaches there to watch. And I'm like, oh, like what's that? But as I thought about it, what he's really doing is he's showing the travel coaches like what kind of player he is. And they are learning who he is. And really that's actually as important or more important in some ways than doing great in front of one college coach for one game, because they're going to want like the larger sample size of what that travel coach is seeing. So that's just kind of a dynamic that's maybe
I love that.
A little deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's an incredible one where it's like, hey, you're so concerned about being in a place to sell yourself to a coach, a college coach, but like you should just be working every day to sell yourself to your own coach on who you are and what you're capable of. Because the reality is like that phone call is going to be made, right? If you're in a legitimate program, like that phone call is going to be made. And yeah, like you said, go 4 for 4 the day that guy shows up, but he's still making that phone call. And he goes, yeah, you saw him on a good day. He was running around the yard with his hair on fire, but it ain't like that every single day, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great one where just, I guess just the idea of like, just be who you are all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's, some of the best players I had, the best compliment I have for them is that they're the same person every single day. They come to work and they do their thing and nothing changes. And, but yeah, I mean, I think Zub does a great job. I'm a big fan. He was my coach in college. And I leaned on him a lot when I was in college and now having a good relationship with him. But yeah, just the idea of that, like, hey, if we have coaches, we'll have teams, but we're not, going to get a bunch of kids and then figure out who's coaching them later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a battle. Obviously, we're in this thing, and I agree with you on high school too, where it's like, to me, Little League and high school are the only times where you compete to win something. Like the vibes in our shop during high school season is great, right? Because guys are talking shit to each other, like, oh, you hit that pitch, oh, you didn't do that. Travel ball, they don't give a shit. I mean, travel ball, like my catchers, they'd be down to throw a 1 for their buddy in their catching class to let him rip a double so that it helps him out, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, but in high school season, it's like, oh, no. Like now I got, my school uni on, like there's some pride to it. Like we got long-term goals. We're trying to win a championship. And sadly, both Little League and high school are inferior in most cases, inferior coaching than what you would get somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Like, travel ball, even youth travel ball is going to have guys with some more experience. Now, whether they're actually good at coaching and, using their experience, another thing. And same thing in high school. High school jobs are not desirable. You're not going to get the best candidates that want to coach high school, right? So,
Yeah. I think an interesting, like, I agree with all of that. You mentioned the travel ball for catchers and like throwing down something for your friend. I don't know if that happens, and maybe it does, but I have like something I have noticed that's unique about travel ball and catching. That actually has frustrated me at times, but also I understand why. Is and this happens at showcases as well. Is that it's like the one time in baseball that pitchers and catchers often haven't worked together, but they need to go into a game and perform. And I find that interesting. Even on the Zoots as the season went on, like there were catchers that Ezra would come into the game and pitch to that had never caught him before.
mm-hmm.
And Ezra has a very unique movement on his pitches. He's a low slot lefty. His ball moves differently, and it can surprise catchers just because they don't see that very often, which makes him effective and successful against hitters. But no matter who the pitcher and catcher was, like when a runner got on second, they would always like get together and figure out the sign. I'm like, couldn't you talk about that beforehand?
Yep.
Or sometimes they're in the games, they don't get to warm up the pitcher coming in. So the first time they're catching him is literally on the field for those 8 warm-ups. And so I just think like I don't have a solution for it, but I do think an emphasis of particularly as a catcher as instigating it, but pitchers can do it too, is like get to know each other a little bit. Like have a conversation about signs or like what pitches you throw or like how your balls move before you get onto the field. Like you can do it on practice, you can do it just chatting before the game, you can do it after a game or even after an outing if like there was miscommunication. Like as a pitcher, I want my catcher to know like what pitches I like to throw when I'm trying to get a strikeout or like what I like to do when I get ahead, just so there's like less shakes. And I know that the pitchers usually control things if they've never thrown to the catcher in those settings. I understand that, but like I just think like that relationship is so unique in the sport of baseball, and probably in sports in general. And that relationship, like, it's just not allowed to like flower or flourish in the travel ball space. But I do think like as a group, we can do a much better job. And I do think there's probably a competitive advantage in like building that relationship as soon as possible in that setting.
And that's the stuff that's so fun about being a catcher to me, right? Is the relationships with the pitchers and getting to know them and what do they like and what do they not like and getting on the same page with them and, getting to know them off the field so we build trust on the field, all that kind of stuff that, like you're saying, travel ball makes it difficult. But I do think, and we've tried to talk to our catchers about this more, is that they need some sort of a pregame routine to get going. And the reality is, and obviously with nowadays, if guys are throwing 1 inning at a time, it's obviously difficult. But it's like, I go help a college summer team here, the Walnut Creek Crawdads, and it's like when I'm out there for pregame, I go to the starting pitcher and I'm like, hey, because I'm not there often, I'm like, what is give me some idea of what the shape of your pitches are. Yeah. So, there we're lucky we have a machine, so I'll, try to create some similar shapes so you start to get a feel. But it's just the same as like if Ezra's ball is, got some sink and movement to the arm side, it's like, well, let's do some angle receiving from the other side and start to figure out that path. And I think that there can be more where like just like you would in BP, we go, hey, we got a lefty today, so the left-handed coach is going to throw BP and we're focusing on getting out, covering the outside of the plate, whatever it is, right? But I think there can be more to it that the catcher can take onus on of actually preparing themselves. But it is tough because when a pitcher is a little all over the place, but they got some velocity and then they kind of start to hone it in, figure out, it's like nobody cares, right? They're like, oh, whatever, he'll figure it out. But if that catcher who's never caught that guy, they're like, this guy's brutal, dude. He can't even catch a freaking ball back there. And it's like, dude, he's literally never seen this guy. Just got thrown out there. Guy's throwing, 94 miles an hour at a showcase, and you got to catch him. And it's just one of those things that I agree with you, and it pains me a little bit because, again, building those relationships and the trust with guys, like getting to the point where you are calling a game and they weren't shaking you off because you knew what they wanted to do and you were
Yeah.
on the same page, dude, those are the best fucking feelings in the game, man. I'm telling you. It's crazy that we're missing that.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I was just came back from area codes where Ezra was playing, and I was watching him, and I was sitting with one of the Giant scouts I worked with for years, and we're watching the game, and the catcher had dropped a couple balls, and like his comment to me was like, "Ah, man, the catching just really hasn't been really good this week." And I was like, I made a point, just kind of what we're talking about. I was like, I haven't seen this many high schoolers throwing like 92 to 94 in one setting in a long time. I was shocked, by the way, how many were
Me
throwing
too.
that hard.
Me too.
And there, you were there too. We saw
Yeah.
each other, and like, so like arms are getting better, faster in terms of velocity. There's a lot of training going on in that space, and they're throwing it really. They're max efforting it because it's that setting, and they're breaking stuff, they're overthrowing it too. So they're kind of all over the place. And the catchers have never, the point I made was like, yeah, this catcher has never seen that pitcher before. He didn't warm him up. They're only throwing 2 innings. They're not doing any practices beforehand. And they're expected to throw really a lot of the time like major league velocity type pitches, maybe not major league command or movement quite yet. And they need to like actually look like it's easy like during the park catching. That's like not an easy task for them. And he was like, yeah, that's a really good point. Um, and he was like, yeah, I probably should give them a little bit more grace than I am. And it's true. And that's hard. I don't know how you prepare that necessarily. I don't know if you scatter a pitching machine and be like, go get it, maybe, but it's a challenge and it's real. But that's kind of some of the settings catchers are being put in right now.
And it's crazy because I can be obviously critical of catching because I know it so well, I do it so
Yeah.
much, but I also have an understanding of the situation. I thought the catching was phenomenal down there,
Yeah.
and it
I
was
did too.
actually fired me up a lot because it was like, man, this
Yeah.
is so freaking cool how much this position has changed. I mean, just looking at the type of athletes that are now playing catcher, I mean, they're athletic, they move like shortstops, they're all different stances. They're able to get to a ton of different positions. And it's like, to me, it was like, I had one of my catchers that was down there, like, they lost a game because he didn't block a ball. And I'm like, dude, like, if we had the TrackMan data right now, you'd be blown away at what that pitch was, where it was. You were
Yeah.
competitive as hell to try to block it. We'll continue to get better, but that's the first time you ever caught that guy, and now you got to do it in the seventh inning, game on the line, runner on third, and there's 150 scouts back there. Like,
Yeah.
we'll build off of it. But at the end of the day, I was pumped watching the catching. It was super fun for me to see.
I'm with you 100%. And um, where like there's been some evolutions that I've just seen in the last year or two that I like makes me really happy. One is obviously the knee down is commonplace. You can see actually Baseball Savant's got like a really nice graphic that shows how often major league catchers are using their left knee down versus right knee down and in what settings. And it's become commonplace. And what I have seen evolve is a lot of like early on with the one knee down, I felt like the range of the catchers was lacking sometimes. And now I see the range, like they've just gotten way more comfortable with it as a group. And the range is like where it should be, and they're often close to the ground. There was some phenomenal blocks from one knee, which I don't know that we would have found before. And like the other piece, and you mentioned it, like the athletes that are back there, I think like in the normal squat position, and actually, I mean, Ezra's a left-handed thrower, but one reason I like he was catching for a while even in that position, and I started getting worried about he's not a fast runner, but like I just felt like you would lose a lot of speed catching, just the wear and tear on the body. But I think with the one knee down, it's just a lot easier on the body and the lower half, and so I could see more and more like speed guys that might commonly be center fielders or shortstops, like doing some catching now. I also think it actually opens it up for like kind of bigger, stronger guys that we felt are always too big for that maybe even aren't as flexible to start, but like because you can get on one knee and move around if you've got really good hands, I think it opens up the position for them too. And I'm beginning to see more of those athletes. And so I'm really excited about like it's I'm hoping that it like opens it up to like more opportunities where you could even put like a really big bat back there who has a really good feel with their hands that you might not have put before. They're still going to need to like throw, but a lot of players have pretty good arms that are in different positions. They might even just be playing first base, but they don't have other positions because of for whatever other reason.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's evolve. You know, like I tell people, like we're still just like everything else. We're always pushing the envelope, and we're learning, and we're growing, and you know, the range conversation like maybe had some merit, you know, 3-4 years ago when we kind of really started doing this. But like we've got to the point where we understand now like how guys move. We can, you know, doing it enough that we understand which guys move better to which side, so we can
Mm.
prioritize. Like, hey, let's just, you know, we want to be basically the best, most effective blocker to the outside of the plate. So whether that's right-handed or left-handed, we're going to get more to that side. So what gives us that? And just prioritizing the stances and how they, you know, can help in those given moments. And I think we're now finally getting past the point where people are like somewhat accepting of it and understanding of it. And I think, like we always say on day one in here, we start talking about blocking. Like the goal to blocking is to make sure the guy doesn't move up 90 feet, like period,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
we're still have some of these like old school thought processes of like, oh, you picked that, like you should have blocked it. It's like, well, was it an effective pick? Like, you
Yeah.
know, we teach a lot of glove paddle because like now on a knee, it's like we're connected to the ground. We got so much reach and control of our glove. It's like that might be a better option than to try to get my whole body over there. So there's so many things that like we're trying to push the envelope and like expand what these guys can do. And the pushback is just like, oh, that's not how it used to be done, or like you need to body that up, or you're lazy, or you know, be a man and do that and this. And it's like we're literally have the exact same goal. Like, don't let them move up, and we just don't give a shit at all what that looks like.
Yeah. That's interesting, the glove paddle. Because I've wondered for a while. There's been obviously like in the pro side, but I think into college too, like how framing works and like what's effective and what's not. There's tons of video around it, but I think a lot of it is like it's the hand control. It's like working from the right place. That's the feeling I've got, and a lot of it is like being able to like not you don't have to move your body quite as much. And maybe I am wrong. Like if you're set up in the right position to work underneath or from the side or um, your body can stay pretty stable. And where I was starting to come to that conclusion is as I think back to like, and I'm switching topics to framing a little bit, but the first time like framing metrics came out, and it was probably 2015, 2016, 2017, like around that time. And Jose Molina was like the top guy. And Jose Molina is like a huge body. And when you watch him catch, he has amazing hands. And he would just sit there in the same spot and he would just go, you know, his hands would do all the work and he wouldn't necessarily move his body. And, you know, Bailey's probably the best catcher right now, which is great being in the Bay Area and watching him all the time. And he he does those moves and he's very like late to do them and he's very quick and then he like stops. And it's like it's kind of a unique movement. But his body's usually pretty still and he does a lot of it on one knee, as you know. And it's like it's kind of like watching an artist do it. Like he has so much control of what he's doing. And so I know you're amazing at teaching it. You were teaching Ezra some of those moves, kind of when he was really young. But even that's, I feel like it's evolving. And like one thing I notice kind of at the youth level, and sometimes even at higher levels, but particularly the youth level, because the strike zone's often bigger, is um, catchers will sometimes give up on pitches that you don't need to give up on. So they might like kind of just stand up a little bit on a high pitch, which is telling the umpire it's high when it sometimes it actually isn't,
Mm-hmm.
or like it's like a few inches out and they're not fighting for it, or they just the umpires are gonna if you if you do it well, they're gonna give you benefit of the doubt because we know framing exists and that it has value, and even though we can't capture the metrics right now at the youth level, I think early in the game, you can probably get a feel for what that umpire strike zone is and then use it to the pitcher's advantage and use it to what you're doing. Um, where like at the pro or college level, you know, a catcher might be given like the actual strike zone for that umpire based on all the pitches they call for strikes. It usually looks like a blob, and like they may call high pitches or pitches outside, and you know that going in. I would guess at the youth level, you can probably get a pretty good understanding after the first inning or two, like what that strike zone is going to be, and then like go after it and take advantage of it, even without like the metrics that are showing that to you.
And like, on the stillness of the body, it's like it goes back to everything else we do in this game, which is the idea that like all receiving is doing is taking all the same applications we've been using before, right? It's like we have to get connected to the ground. Our lower body has to decelerate for the upper body to accelerate on the swing, on the throw, whatever it is. And that's the same application. When we're on a knee, our body is so connected to the ground. We're so still and decelerated with the lower body that now we're seeing that move with so much more speed because of that control. That allows it to take a bigger path. So it starts to just take the same thing. How do we move something as fast as we can and then stop it as fast as we can, just like we want to do when we're throwing and when we're hitting, right?
Yeah.
And then it takes the idea of like on the movement at the younger levels where we're not obviously that in depth on that stuff, is the idea. I always tell the kids, I'm like, you ever been to a movie theater and you're sitting behind somebody and they're kind of like tall and they're like moving around, and so you're kind of like having to move around with them? I'm like, if our body's moving around, that's what we're doing to the umpire. You know what I mean? That umpire's kind of going like, oh, like I couldn't see that, right? It's like the whole goal at the young age is like give them a clear picture of this thing. And when our body is not moving, they're at least consistently in a lane that they can see. They're not moving their stance. They're not feeling uncomfortable. And they get into a rhythm of calling strikes. We've probably said this a million times on this podcast, but no umpire comes to the game to call balls. There's zero umpires that go, hey, man, let's see how many walks we can have at this 11-year-old game today. You know what I mean? Like, they want to call strikes. They want the game to move along. So we just got to make it as easy as possible for them to do that.
Yeah, great point. I love that.
It's the receiving thing is so fun, and I'm obviously a huge nerd about it. But talk a little bit about some of the receiving metrics that are being used, and what kind of like again the teachings that go along with that you've been a part of.
Yeah, I mean, at the pro level, like the big new data that we're getting in is just the biomechanics of a catcher, which we didn't have 2 or 3 years ago. And so we know how close a catcher is to the hitter. We know how far back they are. So like how deep or shallow they are. You could see like logically on low pitches, you might be ideally want to be a little closer to the plate because it doesn't drop as much. On high pitches, ideally you're a little bit farther from the plate.
Depth has definitely been a hot topic in the last couple of years. That's definitely been one of the newest additions, is getting as close to the plate as you can.
Exactly. So if you really want to get technical, you probably need to weigh that against like catcher's interference, because that seems to have gone through the roof too.
Totally.
And like that actually is a free base runner when it happens. So it's like there's a little bit of a give and take game, but obviously like it's shown that there's value to be closer if you can be. So that's an interesting one. We know where like the glove is and where the hand is. So a lot of those movements that we were just talking about, we can now capture it, and we can capture it on scale. So you could like literally look at all pitches into righties and how they were caught and what the movement was and if they were a ball or a strike. Biomechanically, well, you could always do that with video through filtering in a way, but now it's like another level to like see the actual move. I think an interesting one, which it's not necessarily catching specific, but I've talked about Sport Vision and Pitch FX and Hit FX. They had something called Command FX back in the day, which they would like through video, they would like touch where the center of the glove was and then like denote how far away a pitch was to that center of a glove. But it was very like, someone had to actually log it. And now, because we know it, we can create interesting new command metrics with that, where you can see how far away a ball is from where the glove is set up. I know that sometimes pitchers may aim for different parts of the body at times, but in general, I think it's pretty valuable, and it's actually helpful as another overlay for framing because, as you know, it's probably easier to frame a pitch that's like where the glove is than a pitch that's far away from the glove.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can create a little bit more accuracy. If you're catching a pitcher that's just hitting your glove all the time, theoretically your framing metric should be better compared to someone who's a little bit all over the place, even if their pitches are on the edges. So it makes actually a more accurate kind of metric at the end of the day when you incorporate that.
And they miss a lot, right? I mean, I think it was Jerry Weinstein at one of the conventions I was at where he said like something to the effect of like, I'm paraphrasing, I'm positive. It was like 70% of pitches miss their intended spot by like 11 inches or more or something. You know what I mean? So it's like, and that's at the big league level, and don't quote me on that, but it is some sort of like absurd number where again, it goes back to the idea of like, okay, and at younger levels, even when guys start playing on better teams, we have to have the conversation of what's control and what is command, right? I mean,
exactly.
Is he a strike thrower or is he spotting up? And
Yeah.
that starts to lead into where we set up. And hey, like, so we cannot be trying to get him to spot up a fastball 2 inches off the black perfectly if he tends to miss a little bit to his arm side. And now we got a ball over the white that we can't get to give the umpire an effective look. So that's a big conversation, is that kind of like understanding like the difference between those two.
It's a great example. And maybe we are using it that way. I think that's kind of a comment that is a great idea if it's not being utilized, that command metric could be pretty valuable for a catcher going into the game in terms of where they set up. Like if that ball is always running, if for whatever reason, that pitcher knows how that ball moves, but they're always missing this much off, like you can help them adjust by where you set up, most likely, because they're looking at the glove. They can't see exactly where you are compared to the plate all the time. And so you can help guide them there. I think that's a really good point. And so that's like, it's an old metric, but it's a new one that is way more accurate now. And I think it's interesting. It's helpful also like in the minor leagues as you're developing pitchers, and you talked about command versus control. It's a nice metric to be able to tell like who is actually commanding pitches more, because you could, at a basic level, you could say like on average how far away are they from where the glove is, and a lot of the more command guys are going to be closer to the glove. And you can also count things like a metric. I keep track of it with Ezra when he pitches, but it's a metric I've used in the minors too, and I call them kind of free take pitches. But like when a pitcher pitches a pitch and this batter will never swing at it, like it's the wasted pitch basically. So like how often is a pitcher doing that? So you could have like a really good outing, but you might have had 6 or 7 pitches that essentially are wasted pitches. And so this can also help you learn that. A pitcher who used to do that a lot was Harrison with the Giants, a lefty who was just traded to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
He's a local kid at De La Salle, and he was our system while he had great stuff, but he would miss like arm side high a lot. And so he might have outings where he strikes out the side, but a lot of them are deep counts because once or twice that at bat, he would miss really high up and away, a pitch that a batter will never swing at. And so in some ways, like you become more effective if you could just eliminate some of them. It doesn't mean like your other stuff is getting that much better command, but at least you're having like less free takes, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Extend your outing a little bit, all that jazz,
exactly.
saving those. Well, thank you, man. This has been awesome. Taking enough of your time so far today. We do have one last segment. If you've listened to the show, it's called Baseball Bites. It's presented by Black Bear Diner. I'm a foodie. I think baseball and food go together. So I need one place that sticks out to you as a place to eat. Could be something locally. Could be sometime when you were on the road, spring training, something that's kind of a spot that sticks out for you.
Oh my God. Can I give a few?
Sure.
I'm a bit of a, in Scottsdale, like the quick eat is the Chop House, which is just on Scottsdale Road. It's near Scottsdale Stadium. It's basically like bowls with really good stuff in it. They also have like juices that are like freshly made there. And then there's a salad in Scottsdale Stadium It's going to sound really weird, but it's like it's not in Scottsdale Stadium. It's in Scottsdale at it's something the bank. I can't remember the name. It's on 3rd Street. I'm killing you because I can't remember it.
That's all right.
But you can look it up online pretty easily. It's a salmon chop salad, and it sounds very weird, but it's amazing. So that's Scottsdale. If there's Giants fans out there, they're going to travel there. And then in the East Bay, I'm a big fan of a place called Chilito Linda, which is like Cuban food.
Where's that one at?
There's one in Alameda, and there's one in Temescal in Oakland.
Okay.
They have a great Cubano, but their tacos are amazing. So those are probably, if I was just going to name 2, I'll give you those.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Plus, I love when people are local and they give me the ones I can go try here.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you again for being on, man. That was super fun. And wish you all the luck in your next endeavor, and best of luck to Ezra as well.
Appreciate it, Brett. Love the conversation, and keep doing what you're doing. You're making the game better.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
All right. See ya.
See ya. If you enjoyed that, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll have a new episode for you every single Tuesday here on our YouTube channel and wherever you listen to podcasts.